everybody. Welcome back to the Straight Outta BS podcast. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. You guys are awesome. Just a quick reminder, anything you do to interact with the video helps push my podcast out into the algorithm more, so more people see the videos. So that includes like liking the video, sharing the video, commenting, and making sure you're subscribed and hitting the notification bell. All those things really help. They're free and they're the easiest way that you can help push the podcast and get these stories out to more people. So thank you guys to everybody that's done that. I want to thank my Patreon members, anybody that's donated financially. Will, you're one of those people. I believe you are. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I believe you are. So thank you so much. Thank you to anybody that's joined the channel. You guys' support means more than anything. Like, it really means more than the world to me. So thank you guys for that. It's never expected. So anytime somebody does donate financially to me, it really does mean the world. So thank you for that, bottom of my heart. I want to do a moment of silence from the person still struggling with intrusive thoughts or addiction or anything like that. So on the count of three, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you went and what years.
Hi, so I'm Will Knight. Pretty much, my intent here, is to give insight on what it looks like going through institutions and through the foster care system. And pretty much these places are just ran by the state. And, I don't have like a background with T.T.I, but, I don't know if you remember Barb. I'm pretty sure you remember Barbara, but I was looking at her story, and what, inspired me to come on here is looking at her story and seeing how she went through the foster care system and then also was sent from the foster care system into T.T.I, so troubled teen industry. So seeing how, those government seems to be working hand in hand with that industry, doesn't surprise me at all, And so I wanted to give some perspective on, basically how poorly, the government is running their running foster care system and, doing a bad job, taking care of kids. So without further ado, a little more about me. So pretty much I spent the entirety of my childhood in foster care, and towards my late teens, I got sent to 4 mental hospitals. They were acute psych wards, so maximum stay at an acute psych ward would be 6 months. Average stay would be 5 to 7 days, and so these are all state regulated. So like HIPAA will come in and check out things, and there were a lot of problems, that I went through, but I'll get into that. But to get started, basically, in the mid-90s, my mom had me. I was born in 96 in Long Beach, California, and I was born with cocaine in my system. And so when you're born with cocaine in your system, the first thing they do at the hospital is I think you have 24 hours with your mom, and then they take you away and they put you into the system. So that's basically what happened. And so I went into the system, and of course I don't remember, in my infancy, my first foster home, but from what I was told when I went in there, basically I was found with scratches on my body. There were reports that, that I was being fed orange juice instead of milk. So instead of baby formula, instead of breast milk, I was being fed that. And I don't remember a thing from there, but I do know that my first memories, I had a ton of rage, huge anger issues. So I could imagine that place was not a place of compassion, was not a place of, kindness, or I didn't get to learn any of those things, but I did get to learn, what anger was. And so, I got moved out of that foster home. And, what's unique about my situation is most kids in the system have multiple foster homes. I've actually only had 2 throughout my whole entire childhood. And so basically what happened is, my paternal grandma got involved with the situation, and I believe in the beginning she had good intentions, but somewhere along the way, addiction to gambling became a huge problem. And I was able to witness her get away with basically robbing like at least $900 a month for each of us. And that would go to the casino. I didn't know that. I didn't notice it as a kid, but I started to notice it as a teenager, which, contributed to me acting out. But my journey started out with basically myself and I had three other siblings, all of us under the foster care system. And she would, you know, she would have our older sister, around 8, 9 years old, taking care of us. And we're all little kids. We're all under the age of, 10. So little kids, by ourselves for 10, 12 hours a day. And she would be left by herself. And I don't know where she learned, where she became sexualized or where someone influenced her in that way. It could have been television, because I know like there was a time where like she had access to the TV and could watch anything with no parental guidance, or she had been to other foster homes before she came in. So I don't know, but
Possibly groomed. Possibly groomed.
possibly
Also.
groomed. Yeah, very, very possible. And she started, being a kid, being a child, innocent child, just mimicking whatever she was getting that from. She started doing that to us, and for 6 years, I was, basically, molested by her. I don't see her to this day. Like, I don't blame her. I used to have a deep anger towards her, like a deep rage. We don't talk to this day, but I used to have the hugest rage towards her. And there was one point while this was all happening, while there was a day that we were all by ourselves, and my little brother accidentally calls 911 while this is happening. And they show up, and we're in the house by ourselves, and the police show up, and I just remember that day.
This was at a foster home? Or
this is at a foster home.
Okay.
Yeah, so to clarify, my grandmother took us into the foster care system, so she was technically our foster parent, and she was doing that so she could have money to take care of us, which is cool, which is fine, but it should not go to casinos, and it should not be a situation where there's an adult and you have to take care of kids, and those kids are by themselves, and we suffer because of it. That, our sister, it's not our, once again, like, I don't think it's really her fault, but she was a child, but that was happening, and that could have been prevented if there was an adult watching there. And then to have, I know there's great cops out there, but I don't know why or what happened. I don't know if I can blame police or what happened, but pretty much nothing happened. Even though the police showed up, even though they saw all these little kids by themselves in this home by themselves, nothing happened. And so, it could have prevented, further years of sexual abuse, from happening, and
possibly they weren't willing to take a child's, word on face value, even though they should. They should definitely. I feel like anytime a child tells you something, even if it's far-fetched, like, okay, sure, kids make up stories like I'm in like, Superman land or whatever, and I'm destroying monsters or whatever. That's great. That's perfectly fine. But like, I don't think a kid's ever going to make up a story with vivid detail about sexual abuse or being kidnapped or something like that. Like, the kids just don't talk about that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? In my opinion, in my experience.
Yeah.
So I don't think they make it up, So you should always believe children.
But yeah, and I totally, definitely agree. I didn't know at that age that was not okay.
Yeah.
It definitely felt weird and gross, and it makes me sick to my stomach to think about. But when you're going through that and you're a child, you don't know. And so we didn't tell the police that was going on, but still, we were in that house by ourselves, and there was no adults, and that's insane. And so I walked around, with anger issues, but over time, I overcame my anger issues, and then right around age 11, it went from anger issues to like major depression. So my mental illness just kind of shifted in that direction. And right around age 11, that's when I told staff at school, I'm feeling suicidal today. I feel like shooting myself in the head, Um, and they freaked out and everything. And then they were like, you got to go see a therapist, you got to go see a therapist and get signed off and waivered. I didn't get sent to a hospital then, like at that age. And then after that, like fast forward about 2 years, so about age 13, I attempted suicide for the first time. No one really knows about this to this day, but I didn't know how to do it. Like I just went to the medicine cabinet, grabbed whatever. I grabbed some melatonin, and melatonin is just a supplement. I believe it produces naturally in the body, but I just got really good sleep that night.
Yeah.
So thankfully, and nothing happened. And then I went to high school. And high school, I actually started doing pretty well. I was getting good grades. I mean, life at home had pretty much gotten a little worse, pretty much. I mean, when you're a teenager, being by yourself, independence is freaking awesome. But also at the same time, it's nice. It would have been nice to have parents, a father, a mother to teach me, just to be there, have that relationship. And pretty much we were on our own. I mean, things are being provided for, we're getting food and stuff, but it would be like 3-4 days at a time by ourselves. And we know where she would be at the casino. And then you're getting older, your body's growing, you're growing out of your clothes. I was in cross country at the time, eating a lot of food. And then when you're a young boy especially, you're hungry all the time. So I just remember it just being really hard, like her saying, like, we're broke, we can't get this. I wanted running shoes. I had to run in cons, for cross country. And if you're a long distance runner, you really need running shoes, and they're about $20. Couldn't get that going, and I wanted to get like a scholarship and stuff. And so that led to me getting actually injuries, because running in cons can cause you to get injured. And so we were just having issues, but I was thugging it out, 3.5 GPA. And then right around age 15, my relatives, that weren't with us, but they noticed the situation and didn't like it. They didn't like that we were living by ourselves like that, and long story short, we end up having this little agreement saying like, oh, we're going to go live with them, so we have, better guidance and so on and so forth. And I was all happy and trusting them and being like, oh, I'm going to go live with my relatives now. I'm going to know what it's like to have a male role model and a female role model in my life that's actually there. And things didn't turn out the way that were promised. Basically, a bunch of adults, making a promise to a kid that they couldn't fulfill. And so I went to crisis mode, and I, OD'd again, but this time it wasn't melatonin, it was like Adderall. And this was more so definitely a cry for help this time. But pretty much, I called up my mentor, / family member at the time, and I was like, hey, I'm killing myself. I can't live here anymore. Fire department shows up, and that's when I get sent to the emergency room. They give me charcoal. 5150, okay, basically. Okay. That was my first official 5150, and then I got sent to. After that, once I got cleared medically, I went to UCLA acute psych ward. That was my first one of 4. I've been to 14, between the ages of 15 and 23, but I went to 4 as a kid. And
5150s or hospitals?
5150 and hospitals, so
okay.
Both. Okay. Yeah, so okay. I was in a full-on facility, and I went there, and freaky experience, but overall, I mean, I would say it was okay. It was just, they definitely had a groomer there, for sure. I showed up there, and she was able to use her power, her position of power, to basically exploit me. And, how that started was pretty much I was sitting down one day in the day room, and she just came up to me and gave me a hug and said, William, you're so cute, you're so handsome. And I didn't think anything of it, I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, because, I thought, maybe she thought I was adorable, whatever, like a little boy or something, because I just turned 15. I'm not, like, privy to how, like, too much to how girls look at boys when they, but she was a woman, a grown woman doing this to me. And then the next day, I kind of noticed things were getting weird. She walks in, and I noticed she would never wear makeup. She'd always wear glasses, and her hair would be up. She's staring at me, and I'm like, okay, all right, well, staff kind of do that. They have to do that, I guess. I'm in a hospital, whatever. She pulls her hair down. She's got on lipstick, and she takes her glasses off, and she's just staring, like, and I was just, like, getting chills, and I just walked into the other room. And then the next day, it got worse, where I was laying down, and she walks into the room, and it's very rare. It's rare in those hospitals that, like, a staff member will walk in by themselves. They usually bring one other person. She walked in by herself, and I'm laying down, I'm watching TV, and she literally walks up, and she's just looking at me, like, staring up and down, like, for 45 seconds. Like, I was like, what are you doing? And I was 15, and I was in a mental hospital. And I mean, I know me personally, I was not. I know, like, culturally, they say, boys are faster than girls and they're ready, like, I wasn't ready, especially under those circumstances. And it shouldn't be with a grown ass woman who has power and authority over me like that. And she was like, what kind of snacks do you like? And I was just like, I could just fucking tell, dude. And it was just, like, really creepy. And I was like, I don't like any, and after that, she kind of just left me alone, and I ignored her. And then I started to notice that, like, like, why is it that I'm staying here longer, than usual? I wanted staying there about 3 weeks. Usually average stay is about 5 to 7. And so I leave, and I think nothing of it. I was like, oh, maybe they just wanted to make sure that I was okay. A couple months later, I kind of find out, I was told that I was being reported that I wasn't taking showers. And that was completely untrue. I was taking 2 showers a day. When I get depressed, I take long-ass showers, dude. Like, just the hot water. You're in that hospital, you got nothing to do. And guess who was in charge of putting points down on whether... Because you get points to get out of there based off of your behavior.
Points and levels?
Like, So, yeah, there are certain levels, and so, like, to get out of there, you got to get certain points to get out of there. And politicians, so we check them in a way, and that balances power. And then you have the judicial branch sign, basically a lease to get into that shelter, because the way they set up that shelter that I was in, they want you to get out. They want you to get on your feet. So they do that. They do those little, building blocks. All right, this is what it's like. Okay, that's fair. All right. Okay, wait a minute. Why is there $900 to $1,000, or more going to the casino? How's that helping people out, And then, of course, or just showing up and being like, hey, why are these kids by themselves? Why is there an 8-year-old in charge of, like, 3, 4-year-olds, like, that's 3 little kids.
God damn it, I gotta start.
Hello, everybody.
We hospital stuff, and you get pretty much like a truck way to go. Got to get certain stuff, and stuff and pretty much like sending them away, because they're a cute psych ward. That was my. So you get you get points to get out of there based off of your behavior.
Points and levels.
So yeah, there are certain levels, and so like to get out of there, you got to get certain points to get out of there. And she was marking down, that I was not showering. That's not the case, just to keep me around, And that was just, 3 weeks there. And then I finally got out, and then I just wasn't the same once I got out, I didn't look at adults the same way, didn't trust people the same way, and my grades started to fall. I wasn't ditching yet, but pretty much like I tried for a semester to just go back to, taking AP classes and honors classes and all this stuff. And that following semester, I started missing about between like 30 to 60 days on average semester. So after a while, people started to notice, like the administration started to notice, and so they came up to me and they told myself and my foster grandmother at the time, if I don't go to school, it's a misdemeanor for being truant. So pretty much they were saying you can get a $2,000 fine and I could be sent to, juvie prison. It did not help my depression at all. In fact, it made me more suicidal and more prone to that. And one point I want to make there is like, I think threatening kids, even threatening, much less sending them away, because they're having hard times, doesn't make the situation better, and, the only reason why I didn't get sent away is because the administrators knew. They had a sense that was not a good idea. They didn't even feel good that they had to tell me that, and I think that's a vital thing. I think I would have turned out a lot more worse if I got sent to prison or, God forbid. So if you're a parent thinking about sending your kid away to T.T.I or anything like that, maybe that's not always the solution. So thankfully, I had, good administrators, but right around 16, I go and I get this haircut. It's a bad haircut. It's a bad barbershop. I wound up getting this infection in my hair, and it's bad. I mean, I go up to my foster grandmother and I'm like, hey, I think I need to go to the hospital. My hair's super infected, and she's like, no, we're too broke. We can't go to the hospital. We can't go, it's all free, by the way. We have Medi-Cal, but she didn't want to pay the gas money for it. So I'm just like, and then you're a kid and you're like, it looks hideous. So you don't want to, you're all self-conscious. So you don't want to be around in school. So I started ditching more. And even when I had this infection in my hair, I didn't want to go to school at all. And so this is the only time she did some kind of parenting was when money was involved. She was like, you better go to school because I don't want to pay that $2,000. And so that led up to me seriously wanting to take my life. And so, which isn't rational. It's never a rational thing, by the way. I want to say that. I don't condone it. It's not healthy. Fight through whatever it is you're going through. And so I went to the medicine cabinet.
The feeling will pass eventually.
Yeah. But I didn't feel that at all. That's what it does. But still, having those environmental factors, they were contributing factors. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so I went, grabbed some more pills, and I had a choice that day. I had a choice between Tylenol and Concerta. And so I decided to pick Concerta because it's a painkiller. I thought, oh, maybe that would be a painless way to go. And so I swallowed a bunch of Tylenol that day. If that Tylenol bottle was not there, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be here. If I'd have picked Concerta, I probably wouldn't have been here. So I take that, and 4 hours, 5 hours later, I walk off. Police are looking for me. They're calling my phone and whatnot. I'm ignoring it. I'm at the park, whatever, just kind of in some secluded area waiting for these pills to take me, whatever. And I'm like, why the fuck am I not dying? I mean, sorry, I do that as a nervous reaction, but and so, I just was like, all right, fine. I call the police and tell them, like, this is where I'm at. They pick me up, go through the same motions, and the doctor explains to me, yeah, if you picked Concerta that day, you probably would have died within about 2-3 hours, or, at least went unconscious on some level. And it takes about, I mean, at least with my situation, my body and my immune system at that age, I'll say, that's my disclaimer, so don't, but with Tylenol, it would have taken maybe 2 days for it to finally, kill me. So that's how I'd survived that. And then I got sent to Gateways Hospital for Adolescents. This is all in Los Angeles, by the way.
Okay.
And I want to say that all the hospitals that I've been to, all the hospitals that I've been through, I've never been strip searched before. Never as an adult, never any other psych wards, but this one. And it was, like, it still gives me chills, two guys coming up to me. I kind of see where they're coming from, in doing that, on the one hand, like, yeah, I was really sick, and yeah, I really did try to hurt myself, but, it was just strange that it wasn't in their handbook, it didn't say, you had to, report this to your parents or whatnot, and, that went down in that hospital, so that was really odd. I really felt like, I was being taken advantage of there. That was just my opinion, just because all the other hospitals don't do that,
No, it's a violation.
Yeah. And it's not, well, I don't think it, and I know for a fact, objectively speaking, it wasn't necessarily with me. I'm not going to fucking put some shit up in my, like, yeah. And so that's the only thing that happened at hospital. And then I left, and then right around junior year, like later in junior year, I get sent back to the hospital again because of suicide ideation. And the hospital I went to was adolescent hospital for, it was out in Chino, so outside of Los Angeles. They didn't have enough beds. And so that was actually a good hospital. Nothing went down there. I actually felt like the staff there were actually trying to help. And then the fourth hospital that I went to for suicide ideation was Martin Luther King. And that was like the last like bad hospital. So all the hospitals that I went to in Los Angeles County for adolescents, for some reason, one after the other, just weren't good. The third one that I went to in Chino was actually pretty good. But anyway, what went down in that hospital, pretty much, went there. I went there, and first I meet this other kid, and he's in the foster care system, and he's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong. He was explaining to me that there was nothing wrong with him. And, I'm no psychiatrist, but, like, I never seen this kid freak out or anything. But he was there for, like, 3 months because they couldn't find him a bed. And even a nurse was explaining to me, like, yeah, like, we just can't find a place for him. So there's kids being sent to places because there's not enough, there's no place to send them. And if you go into a mental hospital, you got to be having something. And, these places are small, like think like like your apartment, a ward is not huge, not a place, a lot of places to walk. And then there's a small area where you can go outside, but that's about it. And so I'm there, and I want to say around like day 5, day 4-ish, whatever. It's been a while. And the nurse gets really pissed off with this young girl. She's also in the system as well. And she decides to choke her. I wasn't there to see it, but I did ask, the doctor about it, and he confirmed that it happened. But he starts choking her and choking her and choking her. This is all on camera. And another young man, comes and pushes her off. I mean, what else do you do in that situation? She could have died. And police, or not police, but yeah. So this was odd. It was ran by the sheriff's department, but they start coming and they start, telling us to go to our rooms and locking us down and everything. You have a doctor coming out and saying shots for everybody, shots for it, which is like a booty juice shot to knock you out. Like, you don't say that. You don't threaten people like that or anything. And that goes on, and I'm like, okay, god damn, man, what a place I'm at. And then the next day, I go up to the doctor and I ask him, I say, you know what happened, right? She was choking her out. And he says, like I asked, like, did she go to jail or anything, or at least get fired? And he was like, oh, she just got transferred to another. This is the doctor. She just got transferred to another ward. I'm like, really?
That's what they do.
This is regulated, and this is all regulated by HIPAA. And then you have, the state, and then you got, the people in foster care, the system sending kids here and whatnot, and no one, child, adult, nobody should be under that circumstances, and you shouldn't have the right to, have gloves off and be allowed to assault someone or, possibly murder them, and then have nothing happen to you. There should be consequences for these things.
Yeah. People need to be held accountable for their actions.
Exactly, because if you don't, then people feel like they can just get away with it.
Yep.
That's what it felt like, looked like to me. And so, yeah. And then after that, fast forward, graduation comes around, and when you're, believe it or not, I graduated on time. I didn't care about school, didn't care about graduating, but they all pushed me. All my teachers pushed me to graduate, so. I did end up doing that, and so I got a grant for about $700 for prom and everything, and shit, man, as soon as I saw that check go into my, foster grandmother's hand, I knew where it was going, and yeah, I guess it went straight to the casino. Didn't go to my, graduation at all. That sucked, and then get out of there, and then, we're not getting along, we have a very rocky relationship. And so pretty much at this point, the system has this program called kinship or kin gap at the time. That's what it was called, where they'll continue sending checks to your foster parent past the age of 18 up to 21 if you choose to stay there. I chose to get the hell up out of there, and before I was leaving, I was looking through paperwork, and she was signing paperwork with my caseworker with this program I was in, and I was looking at how much she was getting from me, and she was getting about $12.58. So to clarify the situation, the financial situation that I was growing up on, with myself and my two other siblings, she was getting about $12.58. The only one that wound up leaving that home was my older sister, because she adopted her. And when you get adopted, there's no financial assistance. Now, like I said, I want to clarify. If you're taking care of kids and through the foster care system, there's nothing wrong with getting financial assistance for that. Yeah. It just needs to be going to the right place, and it should be regulated in some kind of way. Yeah. It should not be going $800, $1,000 going in that direction, And I could tell, being an adult and having to do my own budget and stuff, and like looking at that, like, so I leave, and this is my budget. So I leave with nothing, basically going into a homeless shelter. In California, we have this thing called general relief, and you get $221, and you get about $230 or $40 so in food stamps. I was better taking care of myself on that. So I knew, I was eating better, I was never hungry, I was getting clothes, I was getting everything I needed. And so I knew, something was up, and yeah. And I was gone. And so during my time, working on things like getting my Section 8 voucher and everything, and, getting on my feet and just getting better from the shitstorm of a childhood I had had. And while I'm doing this, they do a background check on your income for Section 8. So if you have Section 8, you have to have some kind of income. Whether it's 221, I'm saying, oh, all I have is 221, you know, so, and that's okay, that qualifies. The lady comes up and she's like, yeah, you have more income than that. I'm like, what? I don't have more income than that. And so it turned out she was still taking checks while I was outside her home, basically homeless, and able to take that. And so I go to the foster care system, and I call them and I'm like, hey, this is going on, and nothing happens, And so, looking back in retrospect, I was a younger adult and I had a lot going on at the time. My mother had just passed. I went to like 3 funerals at the time that I discovered this, So I wasn't like trying to like advocate for myself because, I just had so much going on, but that was about as much energy as I could muster to deal with that. In retrospect, if I had I was just healed as much as I am today, I would have dealt with that different. Maybe I should have went to the police, but, I definitely tried to go up to the system and do it, and that was a mistake, and they wrote it off, man. They didn't take it seriously, as far as looking into those funds, because it would have been easy to look at those documents, because I had to sign, basically a lease to get into that shelter, because the way they set up that shelter that I was in, they want you to get out. They want you to get on your feet. Yeah. So they do that. They do those little, building blocks. All right, this is what it's like signing a lease, to have rental history, and that helps. And so all that was documented, where I was living and where I wasn't living. And so it would have been easy to, figure all that out. But, like I said, my mother just died, important people died, my friend just died, so I just was not in that place. And so, yeah, that's basically, in a nutshell, my story as far as, giving insight into, how much the system drops the ball, at least in my opinion and way I see things, it's definitely dropping the ball. Some solutions would be like, maybe, no matter what, if you're in a situation where you're receiving money from the government to take care of kids, there should be at least maybe, this is just an idea, just to get a conversation going, there should be maybe 1 month where that foster parent has to provide, receipts for everything they bought, like 800, okay, so you bought milk, okay, you bought groceries, okay, you bought clothes, okay, you paid for gas, okay, you paid for rent, okay, all right. Okay, this checks out. This looks like, okay, you went to Disneyland, or maybe you bought Christmas gifts. Okay, that's fair, all right. Okay, wait a minute. Why is there $900s of $1,000, or more going to the casino? How's that helping people out, And then, of course, or just showing up and being like, hey, why are these kids by themselves? Why is there an 8-year-old in charge of, like, 3-4-year-olds, like that's 3 little kids, like this could lead to something, and it led to something, and then, after that, I got out of Section 8, and then, I started working on myself, and, I got into my vocation. I got into the fire service, became a firefighter, and I'm a wildland firefighter, and, I've been doing that for about 4 years, and like this is around like 2022, and like I was just kind of like getting to a place where like I was thinking like starting to realize this is some messed up shit that happened to me, and I was like, man, if this is the government, right? Because I've met other foster kids. I haven't met another foster kid that's had a positive story. And every time I look something up, I haven't found anything. I even looked up the rating for Los Angeles CPS. You know what the rating is on Google is?
Oh,
last time I checked, 2 out of 5.
Yeah.
2 out of 5 stars. That's insane. And then, okay, I'll give him some credit, there was one that said, 5 out of 5 stars. So I was like, oh, 5 out of 5 stars. What are they doing correct? I go to call the number. It doesn't answer. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, what is going on here, And so, long story short, and then another thing, is if you look in prisoners, right, you show up to prison, right, and you're like a sex offender or anything, you're looked down upon, you know. That's like, you know, and then I've heard things like, you know, like roughly 80% of them come out of the foster care system. You know, there were definitely a few times where I could have gone to prison, you know, and it was just related to like there were a few times where I would shoplift as a teenager trying to get stuff that I needed.
Yeah,
you know,
to survive.
To survive, yeah. You know, and so it's like insane, you know, if they fixed that part of the system, you know, how much less, you know, how much smaller prisons would be and stuff like that. But back to 2022, I was sitting there and I was thinking, man, like, this is the system. I know there's got to be some rich asshole somewhere starting a business and probably trying to exploit kids. And it just, I don't know why, it just hit me. And then
it's for sure
on Netflix.
I can tell you.
Yeah. I know. I've seen your channel. I follow it. You know, I'm listening to your stories, and I'm on Netflix, and then the program shows up, and it fucking blew my mind. I was like, yeah, like, dude, it's like this, like, you know, it's almost like I felt in a way, I felt like a cash cow, dude. I literally felt like I was like there to be exploited for money, you know, and
you're just a number.
Yeah, just a number. And I can, you know, when they were explaining that, you know, in the program, and then like just looking at, you know, like the horrible stuff, you know, it's horrible things that I've been through and all the things that I've met, you know, I mean, and both are horrible, you know, but I could never imagine not being able to look out the window and not being allowed to talk, you know, and stuff like that is going on. And I know, like, I have a problem with it, you know, especially in the United States, you know, it's not cool with me, you know.
Yeah.
But what blew me away is that, you know, us as like foster kids, you know, we don't speak out, you know. And, you know, Barbara, her story is what, you know, definitely encouraged me to be like, you know, come up and say something, you know, speak out on this, you know, her stepping out, you know, and you guys are doing it, you know, and it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Straight Outta BS podcast.
Come up, you know, get away with shit. Content. It's, you know, come can tell. It come up other. I was like other 5 seconds and stuff related to come up. It's
yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Like
I can tell you.
Yeah.
God damn it.
It's come up. Can tell. It's come up. It's, you know, we don't speak out, you know, and, you know, Barbara, her story is what, you know, definitely encouraged me to be like, you know, come up and say something, you know, speak out on this, you know, her stepping out, you know, and you guys are doing it, you know, and it's great, and I support you 100%, you know, and yeah, programs like that, you know, if they were regulated today, you know, I've never been through a T.T.I program, but I can tell you that if they were regulated today, at least, you know, through the state of California, I'm not having much confidence in the nation right now, you know, and children's rights. Those need to be improved for sure, but it would still have some ways to go, you know. They would still get away with shit. And then seeing, you know, looking at Barbara's story and seeing how she was, you know, they're working together, I was like, no, that has to be exposed, you know, and yeah, they shouldn't be like business partners or, you know, anything like that. You know, that's, yeah. So yeah, that's more or less my piece, you know, on this subject matter. I don't know if you have any questions for me or.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. So I just want to say one thing. One of my biggest problems with like group home settings or like foster care settings is that it's like, who are the parents of that household really be holding them accountable to? Yeah, sure, if they break the law and they get caught, the police, yeah, I guess. But what if the police are corrupt? What if they never get caught? Like, who's holding these families accountable? Because I've heard so many stories of children going into a foster care placement or going into a group home, getting sexually abused, getting exploited, getting groomed, getting physically abused, whatever it is, neglected, like in your situation. Who's holding these parents of these households accountable? Because I don't see anybody holding them accountable, to be honest. Like, unless they get actually caught with a crime, and then half the time the police don't do anything, like you were saying, you know? So that's one of my biggest problems with it, and I think that that's a huge, like, that needs to be looked at. Like, they need to be held accountable, like, not directly as you're a parent, like you're trying to adopt a kid or, you know, like do this placement, you're a bad person, but there needs to be checks and balances in place to hold people accountable for this, because I don't feel like anybody's being really held accountable, because in most of the stories I've heard, you know, they're abused and nothing ever happens to the family, or it gets rubbed off and like, oh, they would never do that, you know? Like, why would they never do that? They're humans like everybody else. They have flaws. They have, you know, things that, you know, could be wrong with them. You know, did you do a background check on these people before or if you did do a background check, how thorough was it? Did you really look into the background of these people? You know, and just because they portray as I'm a, you know, loving, you know, family and all that, doesn't mean they actually are. You know, some of the people that do some of the most horrendous things actually have families and do it whether families are home. So I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too far into it, but I definitely think that there needs to be more checks and balances on things like this.
And I got something to say on it. You're hitting it right on the nail. And, you know, our society is a society of checks and balances. You know, I mean, as far as once you get to age 18, you know, the citizens have the right to elect politicians, so we check them in a way, and that balances power. And then you have the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch, you know, and then they check each other's balances. Where there needs to be, and that's a key word, is balance, is we need to really look at, I think, children's rights. And I forget who I was hearing it from, but she's been on the show, and I think she was on the program too. But she was like saying like maybe there needs to be like a new Bill of Rights, you know, for children, you know, right now. So like, you know, there's certain things that, you know, maybe kids shouldn't have the right to do, you know, definitely like the right to vote. Yeah, maybe we should, yeah, definitely stay till like, that should be till like 18. Yeah. But like, as far as freedom of speech, that needs to be protected. You know, every kid should have some sort of way to have a third party, you know, way of communication so that they're not stuck, you know, especially with your guys' situation, you know, I could have advocated for myself, you know, I mean, like, as far as logistically speaking, but, you know, just being a child, you know, and then you're basically indoctrinated, you know, you just see what it is as is, and, you know, you don't really wake up to it until you get, you know, older. But, like, I was thinking, like, you know, a financial system where, like, okay, if this is just an idea, you know, get the conversation going. But like I said, if there's a trusted adult that's receiving money from the government 1 month out of the year, they don't know which month it is.
Yeah,
they look through everything. And if they see something that's like off, you know, and there should be things that are off limits. And then another idea that I was thinking of is, like, you know, each of these kids should have a bank account that is only set up by the government. The government is not allowed to withdraw from it. You can only deposit into it. And what gets deposited is maybe, let's just say, okay, over the course of 18 years, your foster parents get, you know, $12.58 a month about, which is what I was getting, you know, $20 goes into that account. Nobody gets to withdraw from it. Not the government. They only get to deposit it and then examine and look at the numbers and see that no one's not taking from it. It eliminates that human factor of, like, wanting to spend it on things that are not supposed to be spent on, and then say, and unfortunately a lot of kids don't make it through, like almost didn't make it through, some of us, end up dying or offing ourselves, whatever, well, then what do you do with that money then? Well, then you divide it evenly and you put it into other kids' foster kids accounts. So it's just going to the kids. And then when they turn 18, maybe you could set up a system where like, okay, so you want to put this towards books, or maybe, because like if I had $20 a month, going into an account, I would have graduated, turned 18, and then that'd have been $4K, and then that'd have been like putting down, for books, or maybe a deposit on an apartment, stuff like that. So kids have some kind of money, that's not touched, and maybe that'll kind of start to siphon and mitigate that situation. But like you said, it's almost like it feels like it's too far fair game. Of course, you want to protect kids and not give them too much responsibility where they're like 9 years old and voting. You don't want that. But at the same time, they should be able to be 9 years old, and it should be illegal to send them to a program where, you got the people that are embedded, there's a conflict of interest situation where, the people are, sitting right there on the phone and can hang up if you start saying things are bad, those kind of rights, and then, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with everything you said. Did you experience any, like, I know that you had that sexual abuse going on. Did you, was that just at that one place, or in one foster home placement?
That was just in one foster home over the course of those 6 years. Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever hear about anybody else like that happening to him, like in foster care systems?
At least in my home, as far as I know, my older brother got affected. He was touched by my older sister, and then it's common. Every other kid that I've met, that'll say it. Not all will say it, but yes, I've met a few other kids that have said it. That it's happened. It's rampant. Like I said, I have to this day, and I'm sure there's a good home out there. And then another issue is like, I think one of the good things, was that I was in one home though. I mean, two homes. So for the most part, I was in one home, and that helped me out a lot. Like, I mean, I got kind of, I wouldn't say I was lucky the way I grew up, but I was better off because of the fact that I was able to make friends. So like I have my best friend, Alex, to this day, that we're friends, been friends like since we were like 17, and so I couldn't imagine, having one day where like we're having a good time, then I can't see him ever again. So like that situation is bananas to me. I mean, like, how can we figure out like where to put them, that's safe? And then of course sending kids, to the hospital, where I saw one kid there for 3 months and he's fine, and there's nowhere to send him. Or sometimes they'll send him, I've heard of kids getting sent to juvenile hall, didn't do anything wrong, and then like you start hanging out with like, I wouldn't say a bad crowd, but like a troubled, misguided crowd, because I feel like everyone comes in this world good. It's just, like crap happens, dude. And, I don't even like judge people that've been to prison, for the most part, it's kind of hard for me to, like, it's hard for me to deal with like child molesters, honestly. If you hurt a kid, that's kind of that's a challenge for me, I don't know. But other than that, I mean, yeah. But that's.
Okay. And let's see. I had a question just a second ago and it fucking slipped my mind. What do you think the worst part about being like in like each hospital was, or like what do you think the worst part of out of all the hospital placements that you were in? What do you think the worst part of that was for you, and how did you deal with it while you were in those settings?
Definitely feeling powerless. Feeling like I couldn't leave, of course, but definitely dealing with those, I want to say 3 bad situations, where I felt like, there was nothing I could do to get away from, those groomers, that first groomer, like, I just felt really disgusted and like just gross. But I think the worst experience for me personally, I think, was definitely being strip searched. That felt, and then like, this is going to be debatable to me, but like, doing that on camera, I mean, some might say, it's better off camera, but then if you're on camera, that was on camera, dude. And like, for me, like, okay, if they start touching me, then they could see that that's happening. But at the same time, like, I'm a kid on camera being recorded, like, how is that, like, how do I know if someone's not filming that and taking that home and doing, whatever, so I would say that was, like, the worst in those hospitals,
Okay. And was there like ever like in these hospitals or like even in the, I want to know for both, like in the hospitals and the foster care placement, was there like a number that you guys could call that would connect to somebody that would vouch for you? Like, was there ever a number that you could call, like, hey, I'm being abused, like, to call this number, hey, I'm being abused, can you do something about it or come investigate it? Is there any sort of outlet for you if something happens to you there besides going to like that administration or the head of the household?
I want to say yes and no.
Okay.
Could we call the police? Yes. What are they going to do? They're going to go back and let CPS handle it.
Yeah.
So, as far as I know, as far as what I was informed of, no, overall.
I think that needs to be a mandatory thing. I think that's another thing that needs to be mandatory.
Yeah.
Because they need to have, children need to have somebody to vouch for them. And if they don't have a family to vouch for them, or they don't have any sort of person to vouch for them outside of family, then like extended family, then they need to have at least one person they can call that is unbiased, that's not bought off, that doesn't answer to other people, that literally is just there for the children and has been proven to be there for the children. Somebody that has been in this work for a decade or longer, preferably, and has shown dedication and never fucked up and never done anything out of line. I feel like that needs to be something that needs to be mandatory. And even for the people that are in these boarding schools, like if in these boarding school placements, if they had a fucking number that, the staff couldn't fucking touch you or tell you or hang up on anything, if something was happening to you, you can call this number and something will happen. It'll be investigated, or somebody will be held accountable for their actions. I feel like that's another important thing. So I felt like that was important to get you to verify that there isn't something in place like that. Did you get help like learning how to fill out the Section 8 paperwork and all of that? Or did you have to figure that out yourself?
So no, I didn't do that by myself. So, I mean, I did that through a program called Portals, and they're in Los Angeles, and they're good at getting people housed. They have a good reputation for that. So that's how I did that.
Did you have to have a recommendation?
I wound up getting transferred there. right around 17 years old. And so it's not, I wouldn't say it's like I think you just have to show up, at least have Medi-Cal. You just have to have some kind of, medical insurance, and then they can start getting you into the program, and they'll put you, if you're like on the street, they'll put you into a shelter. But another thing is like, I didn't know about it, but there are certain jobs where they will house you and feed you, and like all they want is like a hard worker. Like you could have no high school diploma, so like when I got into the fire service, I didn't find out about this, so wildland fire, I've met one other person who went through, actually I've met two other people that have gone through the system, and they found that, it's not for everybody, but they found that, it changed things for them. Like it definitely, I would say it improved my confidence and my interpersonal relations, going in and then coming out, but knowing that program was there. So like with the CCC, they have fire crews, and then if you don't want to be a firefighter, you can do something else, but they don't play. Like you just have to show up, you call them up and you're like, oh, I'm recruiting, 20 people this month. They'll pay for your bus to go to the residential center, and you'll be housed, fed, and working. And then your rent, you'll have to pay rent, but it's like $400 a month. Now, I mean, it's hard work and the pay is low, and there's some caveats to it, of course, but it's for adults. But if anyone's like in a housing situation and they need a place and work, I mean, they don't play. They, they'll give you a job, man. Like,
That's cool. Okay. And what was like the structure of these hospitals? Like you said, there was points and levels. Like how many levels was there? Was there like consequences against certain things where you'd lose points? And then would you get out when you got enough points, or when the staff decided you were ready? What kind of?
So there was like, it was definitely not as complex as T.T.I, but yeah, there was like a 72. So the first 72 hours, like you didn't really have any privileges. Like you could go on the phone, at any time, but like as far as like going out to the soda machine, couldn't do that, or that was pretty much it. Like just going out to the soda machine, they wouldn't trust you to do that. And then like after like 72 hours, if you were fine, like if you didn't like, and it wasn't seen as, this is one of the good things, it wasn't seen as like it wasn't seen like as a consequence, it was more of like, we're concerned for you, we don't want you to get hurt. So if you're, if you have like a bad day, or you freak out or whatever, then yeah, like if you like get violent or whatever, or something like that, then you can end up, in isolation. So I never, wound up in isolation, and no one really used that or abused that, thankfully, as far as I can see. It's just always been like one person, there. But like, I was only there, longest I'd ever stayed was like 3 weeks. Okay. So out of 3 out of 4 hospitals in such a short amount of time, I had at least one bad, questionable experience. I don't know how it would be for, staying there 6 months, and then one mistake that they're making, they do need to be aware of T.T.I, because there was one girl that she was being transferred to I don't know if she was going to T.T.I, but I know she was being sent to a residential school in Utah, and okay, the place...
That's like 99%. Yeah.
And here's the part too, and she was like, oh, and you do your schooling on computers.
Yeah, that's T.T.I 1,000%, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where she went to next, and I mean, I want to hope that it wasn't. Yeah,
One of the
but
really
that happened.
yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like, they don't know, they're not too aware on these places, and like they can pretty much, because I mean, like in it, and enlighten me, but like to set up TTIs, right? Are they like? It looks like they're not being regulated by HIPAA. They're not being licensed at all.
No.
It's crazy.
No, and it's they purposely pick these states that have a lack of regulation around children's like rights and around just things in general. They do this on purpose. They also go to smaller communities, so what they'll do is they'll just become like the powerhouse for that community and provide like the majority of the money in that community. So what ends up happening with that is the police get entrenched into that. Everybody's bought off at that point, essentially, because why would you? I mean, if it was me, I would speak out against it because that's the right of children being violated and stuff like that, potentially. Even if I can't verify that 1,000%, there's a chance that could be happening, so I wouldn't be with that. But for most people, like the place I went, the closest town to it was a place called Thompson Falls. The entire town was pretty much invested with Spring Creek Lodge Academy because Spring Creek Lodge Academy paid like 70 to 80% of the revenue of that tiny little fucking town in Montana was from that school. So nobody wanted to speak out against the school because if that school went away, then the majority of their economy would go away and could potentially collapse or whatever they might have been afraid of. So they use all of these loopholes. They go to these places where there's a lack of regulation. They do all this sneaky shit, and then they still don't have any oversight or regulation. And it just blows my mind. Like, how is this fucking possible? Like, unless people are just devious and like want to hurt children, which, the evidence points towards for a lot of people. Why all the stuff in the shadows, and why do you feel the need to come to small towns? Why do you feel the need to come to places where there's a lack of regulation? If you're not trying to exploit the system and exploit the children, why are you doing all this stuff in the shadows and being shady like that? I would never trust somebody that moves like that. You know what I mean? So it just blows my mind that there's no oversight, and there really needs to be. There needs to be for all of these things: foster care homes, hospitals, T.T.I schools, all of that. I think it needs to happen. If you, what do you think would have helped you instead of, obviously having a family would have helped, like a steady family, I'm sure. But what else do you think would have helped you instead of being like sent to these hospitals and like for example, when you first became suicidal and had that attempt, what do you think? What would have helped you? What did you need?
Well, I mean, definitely having parents for sure, and definitely having a father, in my life for sure. But I mean, you can get that from a mother too. I'm kind of just guessing, but I guess people say that about men, like they're really good at like teaching you how to absorb pressure and to not throw in the towel. And I didn't really learn that till I was 22. And I learned that through, but I would say definitely having a father, but, and then also having a mother too, and both really just compassionate people in my life, that were consistently there. Now, the reason why I started changing and working on my anger, it wasn't like, seeing a therapist or anything. It was the principle. I was 3 years old and I had gotten into this, like, having another day, having another fit, got violent with somebody, but she came up to me and, she showed me, I remember her showing, she said the first kind thing that I remember her saying to me. And she said, "I know you're angry, William, but I know there's a good little boy in you and he's just trying to get out." Those words, that hit me, just like, I was like, what is that? Like, what is that like? And then going to, Brentwood Elementary School and, having my, so like I was really slow. And so I was in special ed starting out. I was in regulars and special ed at the same time. And so I had like a resource class where like I could go in and I'd see the same teachers, and I was with them for 5 years. But like the one thing I think that they accidentally taught me was like compassion, because they would just step up and be like, they would give me hugs and stuff, and they'd be like, William, you're such a good little boy. Like they just persisted, you know. And if I had that at home and on a regular basis, definitely that would have helped. But granted, in that situation, you know, um, that's the big question, is how do you provide that for kids? And I just wish that my teachers were my foster parents, man. It just if they were able to find those kind of people, it's like you said, is finding the right people and putting them in those places where they can show love to kids and show them what that is, that would have helped. And one thing that I hope before I drop dead is, if we can just stop for the other kids, just narrowing it down. If this is a kid that's going to be there for long term, like God forbid, they need to have like one foster home, man. Like, why is
50?
That's insane. That systemically is traumatizing.
Yeah, I just interviewed somebody that was in like fucking hundreds of different foster placements.
Mm-hmm.
My mind was blown. She's like, I've been through more, like hundreds. I can't remember the exact number, but it was some crazy number. And it's just like, and I completely believe her, but that's fucking it's unacceptable, dude. Like there's no semblance of stability for that child. And maybe ever in their life are they going to feel stability, because their entire childhood was spent being essentially trafficked by the government. Because let's be real, the fucking foster care system, what are they doing? They're fucking moving children from house to house. What is that? It's a form of trafficking. So it's just trafficking by the government, so it's okay? Like, no, it's still trafficking. I mean, that's unacceptable. Like, maybe like a maximum of 3, but I think 3 is, even 2 is too much, They need to have one steady, stable home, where there's not abuse, where they can be, they're nourished, they their inner child is nourished, so they're allowed to blossom, or they're able and allowed to blossom into the adult, into a fully formed adult that, just knows how to view the world, and knows right from wrong, and knows all of these things. Not saying that you didn't, or people that are in foster care don't, but they have a lot less of a chance at blossoming into a fully aware, like, human being. I guess I would put that. You know what I mean? Then it's unacceptable. It's unbelievable that this is happening. Have you talked to your other, you said you had a brother, right? And a sister?
Yeah, brother, sister, then an older brother, and then, I do have, relatives, but I don't talk to any of them. There's reasons for that to this day, I mean, I can only speculate, but some situations, a situation pretty much went down, I didn't see it. I can't really verify 100% that it's true, but then knowing one of my siblings, and I don't condone what.
110:19.
Hello.
Pretty much, relative. Now we all came. That is true. And I don't condone what he did, but I don't know what happened. I don't know. I don't agree with the act, but pretty much we all came out with, like, issues, drug issues, or, alcoholism, stuff like that, mental illness. And he came out of the system pretty much not okay. And he was still around my foster grandmother at the time, taking care of her. I think he was like under 21. Yeah, he was about under 21. So he was still staying there, and he took her out to go to the hospital, one of her appointments, and she came back and she said that she had cancer and was dying. She's been deceased, by the way, since like 2022, and I don't know what happened in that car. I don't know. I can't say, but for some reason he snapped and he beat her. He beat her in the street, and like I don't like the things that she did to him. I don't like the things she did to me. I don't like any of that, but I'm not for, that type of situation. And so, yeah, that happened, or that's what I was told that was happened. I don't know if that's true, but knowing my young brother, it's possible. And, unfortunately that happened. So we haven't been talking, and then I haven't been in contact with my older brother. Like, we fell out. So you have all kinds of, like, we've come out with all kinds of, emotional, psychological issues. And then, I haven't talked to my older sister because, I did come out at some point and say, like, that happened. And, we're not talking because of that. And then with the rest of my family, I mean, I don't know. I have theories. Mine is that, they're kind of black excellence. There's this things, I don't know if you've heard of it, but so-called black excellence. We're pretty much like, their lifestyle is sort of like perfect in a way. I don't know if this is the case, but pretty much like they have that white picket fence looking thing, one went to UCLA and all that, and, all their kids went to college, and the idea of having these like troubled cousins in their lives is like not a thing. So I figured maybe that's why they kind of ripped me off, and I'm like, you know what, do you, man? So I'm pretty much, riding on my own, toughing out life, rolling with the punches. Today, I definitely have my struggles, man. Like, I'm super introverted, man. Like, I mean, I don't go out, man. I come home, maybe I write, play some games, but like right now, yeah.
Yeah. No, I can relate. I'm an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert, which means that like I have all this shit that I have inside that I would love to express, but I don't trust people enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't trust people I don't know enough for that to come out until I actually like really know somebody, and then I won't shut up. Like, I'm just like constantly like, like I'm constantly just full of life, but I have to trust somebody to open up like that. And until that happens, I'm just like a fucking shell. Like I'm like this, like inside my shell, and I just don't want to be bothered. So I can relate to that. What did you ever struggle with any alcohol or drugs or anything like that?
So I mean, I can't lie. I'm kind of a victim, bro. This is nicotine. Like, I mean, like, I hate to say it. Like, I'm trying to get off of it, but I'd like to find a different avenue, I mean, like, I started smoking on and off at like age 10, and it was cigarettes. I've been off of cigarettes, and so I bumped down to these, so I'm able to work out. It doesn't mess up my lungs with these. I'm not saying these are good. Like, this is a good alternative. Like, get off. Don't, but, and then with alcohol, I definitely drink more than what I'd like. It hasn't been like super, super bad, but it's like, I definitely feel like, I want to get off, but like, I'm on it, dude. Like, it's not like if I got off today, I'd have to go into the hospital, but like right now, like, I don't like the number of drinks I'm at right now. Like, I'm up to like 25 drinks a week. And some say, you got to be like 35 to be an alcoholic, And I went and I was like, hey, am I an alcoholic or anything? And they're like, maybe you're going through a hard time. But then I feel trapped though, I feel trapped by, I guess in a healthy situation, you're not trapped by your substance. You're free to get away from it. So you know, it's mild. Fair to say, you know, definitely
Okay.
mild.
Okay. And what do you struggle with the most as a result of your childhood and just like these placements and all of the hospitals and all of that? What do you struggle with the most?
Asking for help. Definitely, it affects you in the workplace, believe it or not. As a firefighter, one of your main jobs, especially when you're getting up to leadership, when you're showing up to an incident, you got to be able to ask for help. Believe it or not, that's a huge part of it. Hey, I need a helicopter. Hey, or even little things. Hey, I need, you know, new earbuds, or I need eye protection, or anything like that. If you don't do that, it can affect your work. I think it definitely contributed to me not making it to my first fire crew. You know, when you're on a fire crew, you're like a family. You do everything together.
Yes.
Being an introvert on a fire crew is not the most cohesive thing, and you have to be. That's the word. You have to be cohesive, and so I learned that the hard way. My first fire crew, pretty much, I mean, you know, gave up on me, and so I kept pushing, and then joined the Seas, and you know, shout out to my unit down south in California, Crew 4. I don't know what it is, man. They just stuck with me, dude. They were like, I remember one of my fire brothers, you know, to this day was like, hey, I was trying to work by myself, and he was like, hey, we got to do this thing together. That's not going to fly here. I remember, you know, and that helped heal me, you know, that helped pull me out of it, you know, so it could be a good thing, you know, like, you know, just that's why I want to change that in the foster care system, because when you're with a group, something about being with a group of guys and us, like, it was a different environment, you know, it was more structured, you know, we're paramilitary, so which means you're like the military, you know, and so, you know, without the abuse, you know, of course, and you're, you know, you're in a structured situation, whereas, you know, in foster care, there's no structure at all, dude, and there's all this drama and whatnot, and that opened my eyes up to, you know, just getting to know people, and like, just, you know, uh, being an introvert was, you know, not something that was punished, but it was definitely not something that would be, you know, necessary, you know, and so I was encouraged to hang out with other people and so on and so forth. But yeah, to answer your question, back to your question, sorry, I kind of digressed a little bit, but yeah, I walked away with issues with asking for help, being overly introverted, and definitely suicidal ideation. I still struggle with that to this day, you know. As far as like dating goes, I've been on a few dates here and there, but I've never like been in a relationship with a woman, you know. That's been a huge issue. I moved out of Los Angeles. I'm in Alaska right now, so I'm like
Nice.
kind of across the water. Yeah, but I move up from LA, big city, into the interior of Alaska. I live in a cabin right now. I go on my first date with a chick, and she's just like my foster grandmother. Not to, I'm just like insane, like verbally abusive, and I'm like, and so I was just like, nah, can't do it. You know, I don't know what that is. You know, like it's what I haven't figured that out. You know, what it is about me that I'm doing that I'm attracting these people. So I'm still working on that. And then not having a driver's license, not being taught how to drive, that's holding me back from. I should have been a supervisor in my field like a few years ago. So I'm still, you know, I could be making more money right now, you know, getting more quals, and I came out of the system, you know, not being taught how to drive. So like I'm in a situation right now where pretty much like it's like the system it literally puts you in positions where like you feel like you're caught between a rock and a hard place, and you have to break the law and do shit. Like I'm like, it's either I go buy this car on Facebook Marketplace and I learn on my own, you know, because I tried doing driving school up here in Fairbanks, and the driving school up here, wound up, I'm not going to say names, but there's multiple ones, but the one was only two, but I'm not going to say which one, but they wound up, not trying to get sued, wound up, basically taking my money. So they gave me half my lessons, and then they wound up I spent $1,500 on them. They took the rest of my money and just ran with it, never scheduled a date or anything. So at least I got some behind the wheel experience, but I'm like, dude, am I going to have to buy a car and figure it out or whatever? But I don't want to do that because, it's illegal. And, I know I could get on the car and not crash it. I can do that, but it would be nice, to find someone that I could trust to teach me how to drive, and I would pay them happily, so I can get forward. But that's one of the things that they should be crossing, making sure these kids come out of there with a driver's license, because you could do Uber, you could do DoorDash, and you don't necessarily have to do interviews for that. Because when I turned 18, I applied for 70 different places in LA, and I could not find a job. I mean, I didn't know how to network at all, talk to people, get through interviews. You walk out with just basic life skills, man, how to talk to people, communication.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that it's lacking. It's crazy to me that they got you a house, but they didn't get you a driver's license. Did they get you an ID? Did they help you get an ID?
No, the foster care system didn't get me a house.
No, that was Section 8, yeah.
Section 8, but that was a different program. That was just for adults. That was a separate program. Portals, they're doing their job. If you want to get a place to stay, they're doing their job. So, I definitely recommend them if you're in LA to go there. If you somewhere right now, if one of the viewers, you just turned 18, the only sad part is that with the C's is they only recruit people between the ages of 18 and 25. But I know a lot of us that come out of T.T.I, or people, if you're coming out of T.T.I or foster care, that day when you turn 18 freaking sucks. It's it pretty much feels like you're on your own. And call the C's, man. It wouldn't hurt, man. And one thing about the C's, they like shy people. They want the people that didn't get their, high school diploma, or, didn't get their, come out of, terrible situations. One of my buddies, he had I'm not going to say his name, but, he had a felony, and they took him and helped him turn his life around. And then now he's with, CAL FIRE, and he's making great money, with them and stuff like that. So, and then there's other options. You don't have to be a firefighter too. You could become a cook, or you could become an electrician. And it doesn't have to be, residential. If you don't want to live there, you can, just have your own place and then go to work, So.
Okay, awesome. Well, is there anything that you want people to know about your experiences, or anything that you might tell somebody coming out of foster care, coming out of the system?
Definitely what I've highlighted, is definitely, just making sure that kids have one home. And then, if it's a kid and I'm talking to them and they're coming out, it's just what I just said, military is not for everybody, but for some reason, being on a unit and being we have a bond, me and my brothers, fire brothers, that is unexplainable. It can create that trust relationship. It can help with that. I mean, at the same time, I've had bad experiences too, where my first fire crew, they're get this kid out of here, we don't want him. So you never know. With the C's, they never did that. But I would just say, roll with the punches, man. Keep rolling with the punches, keep your head up, better days will come, my life's not perfect right now. I don't have a girlfriend, I make, less than $35,000 a year, whatever, that's superficial happiness, but I'm living in a place where it's quiet. Like there's no abuse going on, you know, and there is hope. And you just gotta keep on going, man. You gotta keep soldiering through it.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. If you ever, like after this interview, if stuff comes up and you're like, oh, I wanted to talk about that, or you have other topics you want to talk about, let me know and we can do a part 2. And with that being said, if you guys have watched so far in the video, please make sure you like the video, subscribe if you're not already, hit the notification bell, leave a comment down below, and share the video so we can get these these stories out there and more people can learn about it. Thanks, y'all. We will catch you on the next one. Bye, y'all.